Thank you. Good evening and welcome to Rugby Borough Council's Planning Committee meeting this Wednesday the 10th of November. My name's Councillor Ian Pickett and I'm Chair of this committee. The meeting is being web streamed to the public through the Council's YouTube channel, and during the meeting, if you wish to speak, please use the push to talk button on the microphone in front of you. This will allow the camera to pan in your general direction. Can you just switch that off, please, Councillor Lewis? Not one. Okay. Thank you. So before we begin the formal agenda, I'm obliged to read out the following fire notice. There's no fire drill scheduled in the building this evening, so if the fire alarm sounds, could I ask you to make your way out of the building, down the main staircase and out of the main doors of the Town Hall and to congregate at the entrance to Caldecott Park. An officer of the council will then give instructions on when it's safe to return to the building. Moving on to the agenda, the first item of business is to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of October 2021. Can I ask members to raise their hands if they're happy with those minutes? I'll make that 10, 11? Okay. Any not in favour of approving those? And any abstentions? Okay, so those minutes are agreed. The second item is apologies for absence. Are there any apologies, Democratic Services?
2 apologies for this evening from Councillors Mrs Brown and Eccleston. Councillor Mrs Hassel is substituting for Councillor Eccleston, no substitute for Councillor Mrs Brown.
Thank you. The third item is declarations of interest. To receive declarations of interest as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for members. So the first is non-pecuniary interests, and I will begin with R21/0561 as a ward councillor. Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Daly.
Also application R210561 as the ward councillor.
Thank you. Councillor McQueen.
The same application and the same as Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you. Any other declarations of interest? No. Under item B, pecuniary interests as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for councillors? No. And C, notice under section 106 Local Government Finance Act 1992, non-payment of community charge or council tax. Excellent. So we'll move on to the fourth item on the agenda, which is applications for consideration. Just one slight note, there's a slight change to the order we'll take the applications in. We'll take R21/0561, which is item 3, after item 1 this evening. So we'll come to the first application, which is R21/0789, Zone D land north of Coventry Road, Thurleston, and that's with Karen McCulloch.
Approval of reserve matters application for the erection of a 50,965 square metre B8 warehouse building, which will have ancillary offices, ancillary structures, associated access roads, service yard, car parking and cycle shelters. We'll also have external plant and we'll have details of the continuation of the Spine Road north of Northampton Lane. The proposals also include landscaped embankments with landscaping details and fencing related to these. As mentioned, this is an approval of reserve matters application which relates to Outline Planning Permission R162569. This granted approval for the overall development of the Tritax site, which is shown here, and this relates to this part of the site. So the principle of the development of the overall site with B8 development was established. The proposals also included the details of the access from the A45-M45 roundabout, which would then have an access road projecting north, and Coventry Road would be realigned to connect to that new access road. So the main access within the site was approved. The proposals also approved the demolition of Station Farmhouse and the outbuildings, and that established the conditions related to the planning permission and the Section 106 legal agreement requirements. The current application, therefore, before you today, is an approval of reserved matters application which seeks to consider the access, appearance, landscaping, layout and scale of this phase of the development only. The proposals are for a warehouse building with the ancillary buildings, the continuation of the Spine Road North here. There'll be a roundabout access which will serve service areas to the sides of the building. There's a separate T-junction access which will serve the car parking area and an area of bus stops, and will also provide the exit point from the service areas. The proposals include landscape bunds and acoustic fencing to the south and west boundaries, and landscaping is proposed around the site as well as to the north. A separate application is currently under consideration for a further landscape bund to the north, but that's not to be considered today. The site photos, this shows looking across the site from an existing access on the A45, and the buildings you can see in this area are Station Farm, which is to be demolished. This photograph at the bottom is looking from Northampton Lane north across the site, with Station Farm Cottage and converted barns which are outside of the site to the north. As the principle of the development was established by the outline permission, the key issues to assess with this application are the visual impact and visual amenity and landscape impacts, the impact on heritage assets, impact on neighbouring residents, trees and hedgerows, protected species and biodiversity, transport highways and parking facilities, and public rights of way. These elevations show the shorter ends of the building on this slide. The main warehouse part of the building is proposed at 15.81 metres high, and then there is a taller element in the northwest corner here, which is 18.2 metres high. Then there are lower elements to the sides, like here and here, providing officers, truckers' lounge areas and welfare areas. The roof form of the building will be pitched, and that will be concealed by a parapet around the top. And that shows the longer elevations. The proposals use a range of cladding colours and textures to break up the elevations, with a lighter grey horizontal cladding at the top of the building and darker grey vertical cladding underneath that. During the course of the application, areas of vertical cladding were added to the centre of the elevations to add interest to the building. The proposals do not include a barrel roof form, which was discussed at the outline stage, and the applicants have detailed that this was due to issues sourcing materials and the occupier's requirements for the building. However, as detailed on the agenda, overall the building design is considered acceptable. Objections received refer to the visual impact on the character of the area and the landscape, and this was an issue considered at the outline stage. A condition was imposed on the outline application which restricted the building heights on this part of the site to 132 metres above ordnance datum. The taller part of the building that I pointed out a second ago will be 131.04 metres above ordnance datum, with the main warehouse 128.65 metres, and that is in accordance with the condition imposed at the outline stage. The proposed landscaping bunds, which are here and along here, will be seen in association with the building and the overall development. And as you can see, landscaping is proposed to the bunds and throughout the site, and this is considered to provide suitable structural landscaping. The proposals could be visible from parts of Thurlaston Conservation Area and listed buildings within the area of the site, and this would result in impacts on their setting, which is considered to be minor, less than substantial harm to these designated heritage assets. This was considered at the outline stage and weighed against the public benefits of the overall proposal, and the permission was granted. The outline permission included a condition regarding archaeological works across the site, and the county archaeologist has advised they have no objection to this current reserved matters application. In relation to the impact on neighbours, residential properties are located close to the application site. Station Farm Cottage and converted barns is here, around 40 metres from the northern boundary. Old Railway House is around 15 metres from the western boundary, and Mill House is around 40 metres from the southern boundary. The building itself will be over 125 metres from all neighbouring properties, and the service yards will be over 75 metres from these. The top of the bunds and the acoustic fencing, which are around this area, will be around 50 metres from the neighbouring properties, and it's considered suitable separation can be achieved from the existing properties. The impact in relation to light, privacy and sense of enclosure is therefore considered acceptable. In relation to trees and hedgerows, the proposals do involve the removal of areas of hedgerows and trees, as you can see here and here. The trees to be removed, there's 22 trees, 6 Category A, 14 Category B and 2 Category C. And information was submitted with the application which detailed that these ones are within the area of the building itself and others are within the servicing area, so it would not be practical to retain these. The landscaping scheme proposed includes planting 799 trees across the site, and the Council's landscape officer is happy with those proposals. However, the removal of the trees does carry some weight against the proposals. In terms of protected species and biodiversity, the impact of the overall development was considered acceptable by the Outline Permission, subject to conditions and a Section 106 requirement for biodiversity offsetting scheme. An updated ecological survey was submitted with the current application, and the proposed landscaping will connect to the wider green infrastructure network in the area. No objection was received to this application from either the county ecologist or Natural England. The transport impacts of the overall Tritax development on the wider highway network were assessed at the outline stage, and these were considered acceptable subject to a range of conditions, including the requirements for HGV routing plans to be agreed to ensure vehicles were routed away from Dunchurch. The works to the M45A45 roundabout junction and part of the access road were also agreed by the Outline Permission. These proposals include the continuation of the spine road to the north of Northampton Lane, the junctions into the site here and here, and a junction into an energy centre which is subject to a separate application, and the access and manoeuvring areas within the site. The proposals originally showed an access point into Zone C, which is over here to the east of the site, but that has now been omitted from the current application. Amended plans and the road safety audit were received to address objections received from the County Highway Authority, and they now have no objection to the proposals. The Outline Permission secured pedestrian and cycle links into the overall site, connecting with the wider area, and contributions towards bus services. And these proposals include a bus turning and stopping area. As detailed on the agenda, the levels of parking are considered acceptable given the sustainable transport measures. In relation to public rights of way R168Y currently crosses the site here, and that is to be diverted within the development along the road like this. This has been discussed with County Rights of Way, who have no objection subject to conditions, and Warwickshire Ramblers also have no objection. The developments considered acceptable into a range of other matters, including sustainable buildings, and a condition on the Outline Permission requires the building to be built to BREEAM Very Good standard in accordance with our policies. The submitted plans also show PV panels to the majority of the usable roof space to be installed if the applicant feels that they all meet their energy demands. The impact in terms of air quality, noise and vibration and drainage are also considered acceptable as detailed on the agenda. The proposals will allow the delivery of an allocated employment site, which will provide economic benefits and employment both during construction and operation of the site. It will deliver part of the overall spine road network and will provide a suitably designed building with structural landscaping and landscape buttons, and these factors carry weight in favour of the proposals, although the loss of trees and hedgerows carries limited weight against the proposals. It's therefore considered that the benefits of the proposal outweigh the factors against it. The proposals comply with the development plan, and no material considerations have been identified to indicate that the development should not be approved. The development accords with the local plan and the MPPF, and approval is therefore recommended subject to conditions with some minor amendment to the plan schedule to update some plan references. Thank you, Chair.
Any speakers on this application? Councillor Sanderson.
Yes, question to the officer. When we saw the outline planning application, a number of councillors had concerns on whether it would meet the landscaping requirements in terms of the overall scheme, as opposed to what was originally proposed in the outline. I see that it now is going to have 799 trees planted on it, and there's going to be connectivity to the other landscape schemes on other parts, on other proposals coming forward. Does it now meet its requirement in terms of biodiversity gain?
Through you, Chair. I mean, as we said, this is a reserve matters application. At the outline stage, the Section 106 included biodiversity offsetting requirements, which will also apply to this application, which allows contributions to be spent on projects within the surrounding area to be provided if there is a loss of biodiversity on the site.
But just to follow up on it, the original outline application didn't indicate 799 landscape trees, did it?
No, because the details of landscaping are considered at the reserve matters stage, and we have the details of the landscape scheme with the 799 trees, and the advice I've received from the landscape officer is that that is acceptable.
So now, does it meet the requirements of biodiversity gain as an application?
There isn't a requirement on this application to have biodiversity gain. There is a requirement in the 106 for biodiversity offsetting if there is an overall loss over the site. This specific scheme will result in the loss of 11.61 biodiversity units, and to compensate for that, a contribution will be paid in accordance with the Section 106 agreement to be spent on the long-term conservation projects within the surrounding area.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Councillor Gillius.
I just wondered, Chairman, whether we moved into debate on this. Are we okay to move forward?
Yes.
Okay. Well, having lived to the north of the borough for quite some considerable time, more years than I care to remember, I've seen the development of the Magna Park buildings and seen how they've actually, over a period of time, have managed to try and integrate them into the landscape, and that is by the external cladding. I think that this is the only thing that's letting this one down in my book, but it is far enough away from Thurleston not to have too much of an impact. But I do hope that once the landscaping has grown in about 20 years' time, I'm still around to witness it. So I'm pretty happy with this. I mean, the officer's report is okay, and I want to move approval on that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Gillius. Any further speakers? No. Councillor McQueen.
Thank you. I think the officer's report is quite clear. It's reserve matters, and I'm happy to second approval on this one.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor McQueen. If there are no further comments on this one, Councillor Gillius.
I must add about the PV panels on the roof, because I think that is really important on any of the warehouses. I think that's a real must, and I think we just want to encourage developers to do that.
Councillor Sanderson.
I'm so glad the PV are up there. It's a point that I know Tony's been pushing for a very long time. May we see more solar panels on these very large sheds in the future.
I think more solar panels on every application that comes forward would be appreciated. But we have had approval moved by Councillor Gillius and seconded by Councillor McQueen. So could I ask all councillors who are in favour of that to please show their hands? Okay. And any against approval? Okay. And any abstentions? No. So I make that a unanimous vote of approval. Thank you very much, Karen. We'll move on to the next application. Okay, so we now come to R21/0561, which is 111 Crick Road, and this is with Francis Keenan.
This is a full planning application at 101 Crick Road. It's for the demolition of an existing bungalow and the erection of 2 detached 4-bedroom dwellings with associated landscaping. Here I have included a Google Earth overview for you. I've just outlined the site in red. As you can see, it's a large plot with a bungalow in a kind of a T or a Y shape. There are detached houses adjacent to it along the Crick Road, and then you've got the terraced blocks of houses to the north and the east in Lennon Close. The next 3 sets of slides are going to be some site photos. The bungalow is here as you look up the Crick Road. Front elevation, side elevation. This is me standing across the opposite side of the road, so you can see number 109 there, the bungalow, and then a view of the higher level Lennon Close properties at the back. This is the neighbour, so this is number 109, this is the bungalow. These is me standing at the front, so these are the properties along Lennon Close, number 1, 3, 5 and 7. This is the back garden view, so again this is number 1, 3, 5 and 7. We have the north, the houses on Lennon Close to the north of the site. You can see here the Lalandi hedge. Again, Lalandi hedge here. This is also a view from the houses on to the top of Lennon Close. So there's some steps up to them. I'm stood on the steps, so you're looking down at the site there. This is the existing and proposed site plan. Existing site with the large plot and the bungalow. Proposed site, the 2 detached dwellings. As you can see, they've been positioned to continue the building line of the street scene along the Crick Road. Here we have the elevations and the street scene. It is 2 detached dwellings with a feature gable to the front and the undercroft parking to the lower ground. We then have the floor plans. So again, that's the parking I've just mentioned to the lower ground floor, and then the 4 bedrooms on the first floor. Key considerations. So as you'll know, the Crick Road is located in Rugby Town. So this is the most sustainable location for development in the borough in accordance with policy GP2. In terms of character and appearance, as you'll have noted from the agenda, the amended plans have resolved the concerns regarding design, scale, appearance and layout. In terms of residential amenity, a satisfactory separation distance has been achieved between the proposed dwellings and the houses at 1, 3, 5 and 7 Lennon Close. The daylight, sunlight and overshadowing assessment has determined that 109 Crick Road would receive a greater than minimum daylight factor into window W20. Window W20 is a side elevation window serving a kitchen and living area. An additional informative has been proposed and is read as, in accordance with condition 12, tree planting to the northern boundary of the site will be expected to consist of native species and provide high-level screening and privacy for future occupiers and neighbouring residents. Technical consultees, Warwickshire Highways, Ecology, Rugby's landscaping and environmental health teams have all raised no objections subject to conditions which are included in the agenda. Therefore, my recommendation is for approval subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francis. And I must say, my key concern with this particular application was the screening to the rear onto Lennon Close, because I'm quite familiar with the application site, and actually cycled past it yesterday morning just to get a look at it. And I do think it's important that it is properly screened to the rear with the removal of the hedgerow as proposed. So I'm very happy with that additional informative. Are there any speakers on this application? Councillor Gillius.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate, Chairman, that time goes by quite quickly. And I remember this, the original building being built, and I remember the young couple that did it. So it was an odd shape, and it really intrigued me at the time. But yes, I'm quite in favour of this proposal. There are a couple of houses that are very, very similar design to this on the Rugby Road at Long Lawford. Probably might even be the same developer. Because it always wondered why, certainly why they want so many windows at the front. Perhaps they'll enjoy living in a goldfish bowl. But, you know, they're ideal, they're spot on, they're fit into and all the conditions and whatnot, and the officers covered everything. So I'll move approval.
Thank you, Councillor Gillius. Councillor Sanderson.
Yeah, am I taking that landite fence hedgerow is going to disappear and never be seen again? Because that was clearly will be a bonus in terms of the local wildlife.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, I'm happy to second approval from the chair on this application. Any further comments? No. Councillor Watson-Merritt.
Chair, I'd just like to put my support to this application based on the fact that Rugby is under huge pressure to produce enough housing. And here we see 2 family homes of great proportions, 4 bedrooms is not an easy ask on existing land. So the decision to demolish, I think, is a good one. In terms of architectural style, and I think, Tony, I understand about the glazed panels, but again, you know, it's a modern design, and I do appreciate the way that they've placed the garaging below the house. And in a time when it costs a lot to excavate and dig, there are very few properties that can support having additional space below the house. I think it's a great design, and I go ahead and support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it's been moved for approval by Councillor Gillius and seconded by myself. If I can ask all those in favour to please show their hands. All those against? And any abstentions? Okay, so I make that approved unanimously. Thank you very much, Francis. So we'll now come to R20/0363 in a moment. Okay, so this is application R20/0363, the former Riverside Cantonese, or as I've been recently informed, formerly the Dung Cow. And this is with Lucy Davison.
Thank you, Chair. For the erection of 7 new dwellings with the blocking up of the existing site access points, the re-establishment of an existing redundant site access with associated external works and landscaping. Also for noted is a resubmission of a previous approval, which was application R161939. And just so we can see there the red line boundary of the application. These are just some photographs of the site. First is the aerial view, which shows the site, and you can see sort of the markings of the building that was there, that has been demolished under a prior approval application that was previously approved in 2018. We then have one view from the A45 across the site. The next photograph is from sort of the next direction, looking back towards the site, and to the left you can see where the redundant petrol station is. And then the second photograph is the building that was previously on the site, just for office or councillor's record. Just for reference as well, this is the previously approved site layout for the 7 dwellings under the R16 application. And then again, we have the 7 dwellings proposed this evening. Further details that have been added to the layout through the submission of this application, and previously conditioned information also includes boundary treatments have now been provided. The landscaping scheme is included in this layout, as well as the provision of bird and bat boxes. There's 2 house types proposed in the site, house type A and house type B. We have one that house type A is 5 bedrooms and house type B is 6. And these are the floor plans and elevations for those properties. There's also attached garages provided with each property. In terms of the principal development, the site is located within the Greenbelt, and paragraph 149G of the NPPF does outline that the construction of new buildings is permitted on the redevelopment of previously developed land, subject to no greater impact on openness. An original application in 2012 for 7 dwellings on this site did allow a substantial increase on the site. However, this was then reduced under the R16 application, and the dwellings are the same size as that which was approved under the R16 application. There's also the issue in regards to reliance on the private car by potential occupants of the dwelling. However, also taken into consideration on balance is the number of trips that would be associated with the previous use, the decontamination of the site that would be undertaken with the redevelopment, and also the introduction of the soft landscaping through the combined ecological scheme that has been provided with this application. In terms of character and design, house types are the same as those that have been previously approved at the site. Features included in the properties are brickwork detailing, chimneys, and also a mixture of brickwork and render on the elevations. There is a landscaping scheme proposed, and each property has off-road parking. All of this meets the adequate parking provision for the size of dwellings in line with the local plan. In terms of the surrounding dwellings, there isn't considered to be any amenity issues. Other matters which have also been assessed and there's considered to be no objection is sustainable design, ecology, and highway safety. In terms of planning balance and looking at the 3 objectives of sustainable development in relation to this proposal, in regards to economic, there will be jobs provided through the construction of the property and the residents then contributing to the Rugby economy. Under the social objective, it's considered that these properties will add to the variety and provision of housing stock whilst improving the site and creating a safe place. The environmental objective, there's the designs of the proposed dwellings will reflect and enhance the surrounding built environment. In terms of my recommendation, whilst it is acknowledged that the proposal would represent a form of inappropriate development within the Greenbelt and could cause a harm to the openness of that, whilst being in a location where occupiers would be reliant on the private car, it is considered that very special circumstances exist in this case to outweigh the identified harm to the Greenbelt. These very special circumstances include the previous planning permission for the development of the site, the former use of the site, the existing ground contamination which requires mitigation, and the previously dangerous and unsightly condition of the site following the fire damage and demolition of the building. It is therefore considered on balance that the proposed development is acceptable, and therefore the recommendation to the committee is approval subject to conditions, with the application then referred to the National Planning Casework Unit for their decision.
Do we have any speakers on this application? Councillor Lewis.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was at a meeting when one of the previous applications came to committee, and I suggested then that it would be good to have, since the site is reliant on private car use, to install electric charging points for cars. And I see that there's an informative informative 6 suggesting that, but I wondered whether that could not be actually put in as a condition rather than just an informative.
Through you, Chair, the reason why it's only on as a informative and not a condition is that due to the number of dwellings that are proposed, it doesn't reach the criteria limit that we require electric charging points. So the local plan policies wouldn't provide a basis for such a condition to be attached.
Yeah, the standard is 1 in 10, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, this is better than that. So.
It's through there would need to have been 10 dwellings at the site before we could impose that condition. So because there's less than 10, we couldn't impose the requirement for electric car charging points to be provided.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Willis.
Thank you, Chair. This site is a gateway into the ward of Woolston and the Lawfords and has been unsightly for many, many years. And not only that has attracted the most unfortunate behaviours on the site. We've had many, many problems. It is a gateway to fly tippers coming down to Stretton Road. Development is welcome, and sooner rather than later it will complement the cottage that has been rebuilt opposite on the entrance to Stretton Road. Chair, I'm happy to move for approval.
Thank you very much, Councillor Willis. Councillor Daly.
Yeah, similar to what Councillor Willis just said. I like the way you picked up on the word unsightly as well. I don't think there's any better word to describe this this site. Yeah, I'm willing to support Councillor Willis's move for approval. I think this is a fantastic improvement on what's there. There are concerns around the use of private cars. However, the previous use of the site clearly required private cars, and I think this will see a reduction on its previous use. So yeah, I'm happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Daly. Councillor Gillius.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And thank you very much for mentioning the fact that the previous site was the old Dun Cow. Because tomorrow morning, the 11th of November, just as the sun is about to rise, the Mayor of Rugby will be just a couple of 100 yards away, taking part of what's known as the Roth Silver ceremony. Because the old Dun Cow was the meeting place after that ceremony, just before and just after. So we've got a bit of history there. But yes, charging points, that is something quite interesting, because I would imagine any developer building a new house now will be putting charging points in, because it's a must. And that's when we look around other authorities, you know, the developers are doing exactly that, charging points and PV panels. If we haven't had a seconder, I'll second that.
I'm afraid it has already been seconded by Councillor Daly, but yes, Councillor Lewis.
Just to thank Councillor Gillius for his support regarding electric charging points, and to back up his statements about the Roth Silver ceremony. It's quite a significant event and quite emotional in some ways, and it's one of the highlights of a mayoral year. I can testify.
Yeah, I mean, just on the EV points, I think it is something that developers are going to have to take into account more and more, and I think every time these kinds of applications come forwards, we will continue to make these points, and national and local policy might even catch up with Councillor Gillius. But at the moment, we can only issue an informative, which I'm happy is on there. If there are no further comments, then it's been moved for approval by Councillor Willis and seconded by Councillor Daly. All those in favour? Okay. All those against? And any abstentions? No. So I make that approved unanimously. So thank you very much. And we will now move on to the final application this evening, which is R21/0847. And this is again with Lucy.
Application is submitted for Unit 11 at Cottage Leap. The application is for the change of use of the commercial building to form a vocational training / education centre, which would come under use class F1. Alterations to the building would include the creation of an additional first floor space within the existing building, alterations externally to the existing building to facilitate the use, demolition of an existing single-storey ancillary building, erection of additional single-storey building, the erection of a multi-use games area, and also an amenity area with creation of the vehicular parking area, access, and other associated external works. This application has been submitted in association with Avon Park School, which is currently working to full capacity, and this is to help them to expand the educational offering that they provide in Rugby. This is the site. You access from here at Cottage Leap. This parking area is also within the red line boundary. This is the existing unit. These are the single-storey elements, and then there is proposed the amenity area, then the multi-use games area before provision of further parking. And then the image there is the current front elevation of the building. This is then showing the side elevation, and then over towards, as you look at the front of the building, to the left and the neighbouring unit. The photo on the left there is the access from Cottage Leap, and then the second photograph is the single-storey structures that are currently at the rear of the site. This is the proposed layout. It is through this area that the access would continue, with parking spaces here. There would be the security fencing along this area. There is additional parking with proposed electric charging points at 2 of the spaces, disabled parking provision, cycle provision in this area. This is then the multi-use games area, the amenity area, the single-storey buildings, and then the main structure of the building. This is the proposed floor plans. These are separated into the various vocational areas, also specialised classrooms and offices and amenity facilities throughout the building. These are the elevations. The main changes to the elevation are new door and window openings, whilst also using existing openings. Matching materials are proposed for the changes. And then these are the elevations of the single-storey structures to the rear. In regards to the principle of development, the site is located within Rugby Town and therefore complies with policy GP1 and GP2. The reason for the application being brought to committee this evening is that the site is located within the Butler's Leap retained employment area for retention, and therefore we're looking at policy ED1. Policy ED1 includes the 6 tests in deciding whether a proposal is acceptable, which I've gone into more detail specifically in the report that you've been provided with. Policy ED1 does afford flexibility to allow alternative uses in some circumstances. The sustainable location proposed is what is required for the schools' needs, and it also makes a positive contribution to jobs, with an additional job proposed than what was at the previous use at the site. Also, subject to condition, the use would be restricted to that specifically of Avon Park and Witherslack in order to be considered acceptable. In terms of the character and design of the proposal, as I've already said, there would just be new window and door openings with matching materials used on the structures, which would be mainly screened from the site layout. There's the landscaped area proposed and sufficient off-road parking. In terms of neighbour amenity, whilst there is a large separation distance to the nearest properties, our environmental health have provided both a noise and hours condition to maintain residential amenity and to ensure that there is no noise at sensitive timeframes. Other matters that there's no objection include ecology, air quality and highway safety. Therefore, the recommendation is that the application complies with the local plan policies in the NPPF and is recommended for approval subject to the conditions and informatives in the draft decision notice.
Anderson's hand was up first.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I had a look at this application and can I thank the officer for the correspondence we've had between us regarding access to the site for young people and about the coach that we put on to get them to and from the site. However, as we know, within that northern end of the borough, there's been quite a call, certainly through the local plan process, for more educational facilities for secondary pupils and students. And it would not surprise me if we don't have more applications along this line, because I don't think it'll all fit into the former sites of the site B, of the sort of site C of the old radio mass site. In terms of, so can I just clarify, we will be keeping the informative that if they put the site to another educational use, you will expect to see cycle routes added to that proposal.
Through you, Chair. It's not solely an informative. The use is restricted by condition to be restricted to that is proposed in this application. So in order to change the use, a full application either for variation of the condition or for a change to a different use would be required to be brought to the local authority before they could do that.
That's great. In terms of the sound emissions, the gardens on Viaduct Close are very small indeed, pocket handkerchiefs at the rear. I welcome the condition that there will be some sound testing in terms of its impact on nearby residents. The other one, I think, that was of concern was in terms of what should be used in terms of heating. In your informative, it refers to the use of gas as an alternative heating form. Did you look at ground source heat pumps for this educational facility, similar to the ones that were installed at Warwickshire College and which are under the car park? Again, would you widen that informative to allow them to use other forms of heating? Because you've just said gas is the alternative.
Through you, Chair. The wording of informative 1, as is in the draft, talks about that it could include the installation of ultra-low emission boilers, and it gives the parameters for that. If gas is used, it's not that is restricted, and it's just the standard informative that we have in terms of air quality mitigation
Right, so
measures that's been used.
it's a standard informative, but you would like to see, in terms of their renewable obligations, you would like them to use other sources.
How they choose to
Yeah.
heat the building is up to them whenever
Yeah.
they, if they take
My,
it on.
my concern, Chair, is it could be very expensive to us for a school to retrofit to the new standards at a later date if they put in gas in now, you see.
I mean, I agree with the point you're making, but I think it's for the applicant to decide how they want to address those issues in line with the policies that we set out, rather than necessarily for us to dictate to them what they need to put in at this stage.
Never dictate, Chair. It's an alternative that they might want to consider.
And I'm sure if they're watching, they will take that under advisement. Any further comments on this? Councillor Daly.
Yeah, just something I wanted to confirm. I am correct in thinking that this site will only be used by children who are brought in by minibus from the existing site near to Paddocks Primary School.
Yes, the pupils will be brought by minibus from Avon Park School in the morning and will also be returned to Avon Park in the afternoon to then continue their journey home.
Okay, because I mean I do have some serious concerns in general about opening schools on industrial estates, and I do have some concerns about the safety of that. However, I can understand that if it is solely being used for that, and I appreciate your comments earlier about that. If there couldn't be any other use, it has to be used by Avon Park, by the academy chain that runs the school. So I appreciate that clarification.
Councillor Gillies.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just a point on the ground source heat pumps and air source heat pumps for that matter. They do have to be installed in ultra well insulated properties and buildings for them to be of any use whatsoever. Otherwise, it costs an absolute fortune in running costs. And we're moving away from that sort of well, if you look on YouTube and see some of the innovators that we're moving towards hydrogen and putting hydrogen down the gas main, because we've got a company right in the borough of Rugby, High Tech Anstey Business Park, Cadent, who are manufacturing those very things, hydrogen boilers. And bearing in mind that there already will be a gas supply in that building already, heated by gas anyway. So they're probably trying to use the existing facilities. But certainly the point I want to make is that, it's, and I'm going to move approval on this, but the point I want to make is the use of the building, because when we look around society, we need people to get into all sorts of work, whether it be working in a care home or whether it be driving a HGV. This is the sort of thing we've got to teach people to do. We can't all sit behind computer screens. We've got to get out there and do things with our hands. And that is what sort of thing we want to encourage. So those folks who might be listening to this, who are going to be teaching youngsters at this facility, teach them all the things, practical skills and all the rest of it, because we need them out there. We need electricians, we need carpenters, we need people to construct warehouses, all those sort of people. We want to teach them here so they can work in our own environment.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. And just to confirm, you've moved approval on this application. Thank you. Councillor Sanderson,
Yeah,
with
just-
the note that we're perhaps straying slightly on the air
Just
source
a
heat
little
pump issue.
correction. Just a little correction. I know Councillor Gillies is a busy chap, and he's probably not noticed that in the Chancellor's speech he was giving away money for people to have ground source pumps installed on their properties. The most economic way to do it would be into a public access building rather than a mate's manor.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. As I said, I think we're perhaps straying slightly from the application that's before us. Councillor Watson-Merritt. Thank you very much. Any further comments on this application? No? Okay, so it's been moved for approval by Councillor Gillies and seconded by Councillor Watson-Merritt. Can I ask all those in favour to show their hands? We'll make that 10. All those against? And any abstentions? That's 1 abstention. So that is approved. Thank you very much, Lucy. And we now come to item 5 on the agenda, which is the planning appeals... site visits. Richard, have there been any requests for site visits?
Thank you, Chair. We've actually had 2 requests for site visits. The first one is from Councillor Dumbleton for R21/0904. It's an approval of reserved matters for the retention of landscape bunds and part removal of bunds at the rear of Brayfield Lees on the Ashlawn Road development. Concerns on the grounds of the application's retrospective, height, overlooking, loss of privacy and no justification. So if members want to take that vote first.
Okay. Can I ask all those who would be in favour of a site visit for that application to show their hands? And all those against? And any abstentions? Okay, so we'll have that site visit unanimously. Thank you, Richard. And the second site visit request?
The second request is from Councillor O'Rourke. This is for R21/0976. It's at 9 Cambridge Street, and it's for the change of use to a 7-bed house and multiple occupation. Concerns amongst various issues that have been raised by residents also include residential amenity and parking.
Thank you very much. Again, all those in favour of a site visit to 9 Cambridge Street? Any against? And any abstentions? Okay, so we'll have that one unanimously as well. Thank you very much. Right, now on to the planning appeals update. Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 updates to the appeals report since it's actually been published. They're in Appendix B. In terms of the Treetops appeal at Shilton Lane in Shilton, this actual appeal has now actually been withdrawn by the appellant, and let's say now the matter is being looked at by enforcement. And also the next application on the list, Land to Rear of Dunsmore Garage, Contra Road, Thurleston. That application has been allowed by the inspectorate. Interestingly, the inspectorate considered that the site was sustainable, although it is outside any defined settlement boundary. The inspector felt that although it was 1 kilometre from Dunchurch, that Dunchurch had plenty of facilities and was accessible by alternative means other than a private car. It is a greenfield site, but the inspector also then did stress that although the council has a 5-year housing land supply, this is only a minimum, not a maximum. So the appeal was allowed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the appeals update? No? Okay. And then finally, item 7, which is delegated decisions.
Yeah, just a note, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, well, that concludes this evening's Planning Committee meeting. So thank you very much, everyone, and thank you if you've been watching at home. And IT, if you could stop the live stream, please.